Alright, this is part 4 of the Geometry Common Core Reviewed Guide that I created. And like I said for the other parts, if you want a copy of this, you can purchase it on Teachers Pay Teachers. So for part 4, we're going to look at 3 sections. We're going to look at sections 13 to 15. We'll talk about area and volume, equations of circles, and distance, midpoint, and slope. So go ahead and turn to page 29. Alright, now we're on the area and volume section. I have copy and pasted a copy of the reference sheet on the New York State Common Core. Pretty much anything on the left side, and also including the Pythagorean theorem on the right side, will be fair game on this section. So let's go ahead and jump right into a couple questions. I want to look at one of the sector questions. It says the area of a 120-degree sector of a circle with a diameter of 12. Now the big thing with these is no picture, draw a picture. So I'm going to draw a circle. It says a diameter of 12. And then a 120-degree sector. So 120 degrees would be like this. And I'll kind of shade that section in. So we need to find a section of that circle. So we're going to need to use the area formula, which if it's a sector, it's going to be x over 360 and then pi r squared. So for this one, we have a 120-degree section, which would be 120 over 360, and then pi, and then the radius in this case is going to be 6 squared. And then you'd want to, with your calculator, and you could simplify the fraction, do all the other stuff if you need to, but you could just go ahead, because our answers are in terms of pi. You could just do the fraction, 120 divided by 360, and then it's times 6 squared, which will end up being 12, and we didn't multiply the pi in, so that means that the answer for this one would be B. Now let's move on to another question. Let's take a look at question 7. So question 7, triangular prism, base dimensions of 4 centimeters for the height and 10 centimeters for the base, and a prism height of 15. So I'm going to try my best to draw a triangular prism over here. And it's basically just two triangles connected by the height. So in this case they have 4 and 10. Let's say the 4 and 10 for the triangle, and then a prism height of 15. Now the big idea with prisms is this capital B, and that's the area of the base figure. So we're going to use two formulas for this. We're going to use first the area of the triangle, which will go in for our big B. And then we have the formula that I already wrote down, so we're going to have to multiply that by the height of the prism. So that'll be times that h value. So what I'll need to put in the calculator will be 1/2 times 4 times 10 times 15. And that'll be what you type in your calculator for this one. So just make sure that you use the correct formula for the two-dimensional base figure, because a lot of people tend to forget the 1/2. Now let's move on to another question. We'll take a look at a cylinder question. Now we're going to look at C. Now for the cylinder, like it's on the reference sheet, you got pi r squared h. So right now, as it stands, I have h, which is 8, because that connects the two cylinders. I don't have the radius yet. So I do have a right triangle. So I was talking about earlier, I'm going to use Pythagorean theorem. 10's the hypotenuse, so this will end up being a squared plus 8 squared equals 10 squared, and the 8 and the a are interchangeable. So to kind of save some time, a is going to end up being 6. So this whole length would be 6, but the radius is going to be 3. So I would type in first, I could type in the formula if I want an exact answer. So in this case, it'd be, to get an exact answer, I would omit pi. So I'd end up with 72 pi would be the exact answer. If I wanted to the nearest tenth, I'm going to have to throw in that pi. So if I take that answer and multiply the pi into a second and then caret symbol, I could find an answer to the nearest tenth, which would then be in 226.2. So different ways they could ask for formulas when you're dealing with circles. Sometimes pi, sometimes nearest tenth. Now we're going to move on to some, in this case, circle questions. So, big idea with completing the square is using this formula, b divided by 2 squared. The coordinates at the center are opposite of the actual coordinates, and the radius has to be included in that radius is in squared form. So when we're talking about a circle, it's similar to Pythagorean theorem, but it's this equation. So in the case of question 1, which equation represents a circle centered at 3, -1, radius of 8, well, I know the radius has to be squared, so that'll help me get rid of a and c. And then these two values have to be the opposite in the formula. So that's going to end up making b the answer, because I have in this one -3 and +1. It's got to be the opposite of that. Now, if you look at question 7, we'll write one of the equations for the circle. So I'm going to do circle A, and what you want to do for circle A is you want to write down what the radius and the center are. So the center for this question ends up being 5, 6, and the radius, you just count the spaces from the center to the outside, ends up being 3. So when you write that out, opposite signs in the parentheses, don't forget the squareds. And then my radius has to be squared, so 3 squared would be 9. So that'll help you with the other ones. And then what we'll have to do with completing the square questions is you want to start by pairing up your x's and y's. So you got x squared plus 2x plus something. And we got y squared minus 6y plus something. And that 6, that -6 has to be added over. So it's going to equal 6. Now to find those two spaces, that's when you do the b divided by 2 squared. And I'm going to start by just doing the x part. Actually, let's do the y part instead. So if I do -6 divided by 2 squared, and put that in the calculator, make sure you put the parentheses in, you're going to get 9. And then you also have to make sure you add the 9 to that other number. So what that's going to help us do is that's going to help us complete the square. So this would end up being y minus 3 squared for that part, and that'll help me fill in the center because that'll be the opposite sign. So the part I want you to do is figure out that number that's going to go there by using the formula above, add that to both sides, and then you can complete the rest of the problem. Okay, and then try the second one. Now the last part that we're going to look at, distance, midpoint, and slope formulas. We're just going to look at a couple quick examples. So formulas are listed for you. If you take a look at question 1, point A, point B, I tell my students to stack them. So we got -2, 4, 4, 8. You can do bottom minus top, so in this case you would end up getting 6 and 4. and then you do y's divided by x's, the change in y divided by the change in x ends up being 4 over 6, and you can reduce that. In that case, it would end up being 2 over 3. And you can use the function on the calculator. If you don't know how to do it yet, you would just put in the fraction and then hit math, and then the calculator will reduce it for you. So, a lot of similar questions here when you're dealing with this. If you look at, let's see, a distance question, 5 has a and b, so the same thing you want to do what you do with the slope, except with distance, you're going to use those differences. So you got 4 and 2, and you would stick those as the legs in Pythagorean theorem. Okay? And that'll help you find which answer is going to be true. So you can use that same strategy with slope and distance. Just make sure you use it correctly. Okay? And if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask in class. This section does go up to page 39. Okay? And good luck.